Hello, good evening, everybody. So if you could please quiet down to start tonight. Hello. I am Elijah Pickering. I am one of the marketing chairs for this year's Northwood University Freedom Week. And I'm coming up here tonight to thank some of our sponsors that made tonight possible. But before that, I would like to do some housekeeping things. So if you have your tickets and you weren't able to turn it in at the front desk, please remember to do so. Or if you do not have one, sign in on the sign-in sheet that we have. And then also, any and all donations are appreciated, and they will go straight to next year's Freedom Week to bring in even more speakers. So for the sponsors that made tonight possible, the Young Americas Foundation, TPUSA, who helped bring our speaker tonight, Bill Whittle, and then of course the McNair Center, who yet again have been the main sponsor for Freedom Week. And then of course I'd like to thank our e-board that made this whole week possible this year. So Morgan Panning, Noah Stoffel, Tony Sierra, Christine Tokarev, Logan Shoup, Josh Weckesser, and Brandon Gonzalez. And of course, lastly, a huge thank you to, of course, Dr. Tokarev, who started Freedom Week, and we would not even be here without him. So thank you, guys. And then now, Christine Tokarev.
Humanity knows just two forms of organizing public interactions. One of the systems uses political coercion. The other is based on voluntary cooperation. One depends on a central plan. The other relies on individual initiative. One treats citizens as children who need motherly care from the cradle to the grave. The other recognizes people as autonomous creatures with inalienable rights and responsibilities. One is led by charismatic leaders and wise counselors. The other is impossible without free thinkers. One comes from the barrel of a gun. The other appears peacefully and organically from the market process. The first one has many names. The most widely used today is socialism. The alternative is freedom under the law, better known as capitalism. Northwood University Freedom Week promotes the ideas that support free market capitalism, and today we have one of the most passionate voices in the liberty movement to give the closing lecture dedicated to Milton Friedman.
Bill Whittle is an American conservative blogger, political commentator, director, screenwriter, editor, pilot, author, and voice of the Common Sense Resistance. He is best known for his YouTube videos, one of which, 3.5 Days, has been viewed over 2.5 million times. He is currently the host of The Firewall and co-hosts Right Angle with Stephen Green and Scott Ott. Bill's latest video series, We the People 2.0, are made for young adults in cooperation with Turning Point USA. In addition, Mr. Whittle has interviewed a number of political personalities as a PJTV commentator. He's a former National Review online contributor and has been a guest on the Fox News Channel, The Dennis Miller Show, and Sun TV, and a multitude of national radio programs. His first book, Silent America, Essays from a Democracy at War, was published in 2004. And since 2009, Mr. Whittle has been a featured speaker at numerous universities, Republican, Tea Party, and high school events throughout the nation. Mr. Bill is a fellow of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and he contributes daily commentary for NRA TV. His new daily talk show, Bill Whittle Live, premiered in January of 2017. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Mr. Bill Whittle.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Good. I just came in from Los Angeles last night, and just wanted to tell you, first of all, before I get started, how good it is to come and visit the United States. I actually grew up in America. And coming from Los Angeles is just great to come back and see actual America and actual people and so on, so that makes me feel really good. I had a number of people ask me to do a State of the Union address tonight, which is not something I normally do, but I think it's a pretty good idea. It's not going to be a formal presentation so much as just a look at where we are. and how we got there perhaps, and maybe, how we can get out of where we are, because some places we're in are very, very good, and some places that we're in are not so good, and some places that we're in are just plain terrible. So why don't we do something like that? Why don't we start off with the economy? I haven't had a chance to use this for a while, but I think this would be a good chance to do it, to show it off. I've got 2 pieces of paper here in my wallet, and they're basically just square pieces of paper, and they both got pictures on them, and they both have numbers on them. And here they are. This one is actually real money from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, and it's in the amount of $100 trillion. I never go out without $100 trillion in my wallet. You never know when you may need to buy Michigan. Over here, another same thing, piece of paper, money and pictures on it, $20 bill. And if you put these 2 pieces of paper down anywhere in the world, people will pick up the $20 bill if you told them they could only get one. And the $100 trillion bill is a novelty. You can buy it for $7 because it's real money. I like to show people having $100 trillion. So what's the difference between these 2 pieces of paper? What is the actual difference between these 2 pieces of paper? Why is $100 trillion worthless and $20 not worthless? Why? Well, because we have confidence in this. We think that this is worth something because we have the belief that we can trade this for something that we want. If we put a bunch of them together, we can get just about anything we want. But when our government owes $20 trillion, how long is this going to be worth anything? How long is the idea of money and a dollar going to last when everybody knows that this money is not being paid back, and I'm beginning to think simply cannot be paid back? To get an idea of what $20 trillion is really not possible for me to describe. There's some terrific videos out here, but let me just give you an idea of what $20 trillion looks like. If you had brand new $100 bills and you laid them out just on the floor in the shape of the tower of the World Trade Center, that wide, and built it as high as the World Trade Center. You built the World Trade Center solid with $100 bills. $20 trillion is 17 of those towers. 17 of those towers, $100 bills stacked aside the World Trade Center as wide and as deep. I can't begin to tell you what a danger this is, and I don't know what's going to happen. Is eventually the time going to come when somebody is basically going to pull out of this game and they're going to say, we want our money now, and the money's not there, and then this becomes this? Because I don't want to see that happen, and I'm sure you don't want to see that happen either. What happens in a case like that, usually when people lose confidence in money, is you have something called runaway inflation. One of my favorite stories from history, it's a true story obviously, was that during the runaway inflation in Germany in the mid-20s, in order to buy a loaf of bread, you had to take a wheelbarrow or some enormous amount of cash down. You had to take 100 million German marks to go buy a loaf of bread. And this woman went down to buy a loaf of bread with her little son, and she had a gigantic basket filled with money. And as she got close to the bakery, the kid got away and ran off and started to run out in the middle of the street, and the mom dropped the basket, went out to get the boy, and when she came back, the money was still there, but people stole the basket. And why would that be? Well, it's because the basket is worth something. We don't know where we're going on this. And sometimes we're in such new territory that I really do ask myself, are we in a world now where money is essentially just printable? Do we just keep doing this forever? Or does this bill ever come due? If it comes due, we're in big trouble, because we've spent 17 World Trade Centers worth of money that we don't have. And every single year, they pitch another World Trade Center on there. The people who are promising you free things from the government are stealing from somebody, but the people they're mostly stealing from is you. What they're basically doing is they're borrowing that money from you so that they can have fun now. But the people who are spending $20 trillion a year, who have built up a total debt of $20 trillion and about $1 trillion a year, are getting the benefits for that now, but they're not paying the bill. That stack gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the people that are going to pay that bill is you. And I'm sorry, I didn't do it. I'm against this whole thing. I think the spending is absolutely insane, needs to be kept under control, but nevertheless, it's there. What's going to happen? I don't know. I don't know. But I do know what's happened in the past when people lost confidence in money, and it's not pretty, and it's not fun. So if we don't get an understanding of the State of the Union by starting off with our economic situation, then we won't be anywhere. I was in a debate with a woman, a Democrat from Orange County, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. And I was talking about this debt and about this kind of spending. And she said, well, California is the richest state in the union. It's got the 7th biggest economy in the world. And I said, first of all, and it's run by Democrats, by the way. First of all, it is the 7th biggest economy in the world. And when it was run by Republicans, it was the 5th biggest largest economy in the world. But more than that, California is not the richest state in the union. California is the poorest state in the union. The United States of America is not the richest country in the world. It's the poorest country in the world. If you account for government spending the way that you would have to account for any other business in the world, if you were to go out there in the world and start your own business or get hired at whatever job you want to, including NGOs, including charities, all the rest, if you were to go out there, you would have to come up with the value of things by taking a look at what you have versus what you owe, assets and liability, income and debt. And there's no other country in the world that owes $20,000 billion. We're the poorest country in the world. But we don't even think about that. We don't even talk about it. But when that stuff suddenly comes due, there's going to be something catastrophic happening. And I'm doing my level best to try and make sure that this is still worth something and that this doesn't become an American joke. I don't want to have to go down and do what they did in Germany, and they take this $20 bill down to the bank, and this $20 bill is essentially now worthless. And I would go to the bank just like they did in Germany and Argentina and all the rest of the places that have had this runaway inflation, and I would have to go down to the bank and have my $20 bill, and they would stamp 3 zeros after it. The bank would do that, so it was official. So now I've got a $20,000 bill, because that's what I'm going to need to buy a loaf of bread today. I'm going to need $20,000. Tomorrow I'll need $40,000. So the state of our country is very good, but not very deep. We're very happy, we're very free, we're very prosperous, but underneath our feet, the foundations of all of that is really, really in trouble. And it's a problem that we have been talking about for a long time. And it's a problem that I'm going to continue to talk about until I'm dead. And it's a problem you're going to talk about until you're dead, and your kids will talk about it until they're dead. That's what it's going to take to pay this money back. So my question is, if I'm going to be talking about the State of the Union, how much money does the government need? Nobody asked that question. I've never heard it asked before. We know what you spend, and we know what you take, but what do you need? What is the correct amount of money to tax the American people for? What should the government cost us? Well, first of all, our government costs more than the economy of China. That's just to administer the government. This is the freest country in the world, presumably. Communist government is their entire government if the United States costs more than the Chinese GDP. So the question is, what does the government cost and why? And I think the only answer is, you could say that the federal government needs enough money to carry out the obligations of the Constitution in the most frugal manner possible and to get the best value that they possibly can. Period. If it's in the Constitution, then the federal government needs to find the way to do it, but they need to do it for the minimum amount of money and still get a quality product. Do you know why we owe $20 trillion? It's very simple when you think about it. We owe $20 trillion because everything that the government spends is fourth quadrant spending. You guys ever heard about this before? Imagine up here, just a simple pattern. Square 1, square 2, square 3, square 4. 4 quadrants. In the upper left-hand corner, you have, I'm going to spend my own money on myself. Then you're going to have, I'm going to spend my own money on other people. And then you have, I'm going to spend other people's money on myself. And then you have, I'm going to spend other people's money on other people. Those are the 4 ways you can do it. If you're going to spend your own money on yourself, which is how we all work in the real world, then you want to get the most value for the least amount of money. You want the very best product you can, the best track shoes, best best smart device, whatever it is. You want the best one you can get at the lowest possible price. If, on the other hand, you are using other people's money to buy what you want, you don't care about what it costs. You want the gold-plated, absolute, diamond-encrusted iPhone case that costs $30,000, and why not? You're not paying for it. Why wouldn't you want that? That's Quadrant 2 spending. On the other hand, if you're spending your money on other people, it's the exact opposite. All you care about is what it costs. You don't care about the quality. You want to pay as little as possible for something that's being taken from you to give to somebody else. And finally, when you get to other people spending money on other people, which is where the government is, we're in the worst of both worlds. Nobody cares about the quality, and nobody cares about the cost. The money doesn't belong to anybody, so of course we'll spend it. And if it costs another $100 billion to do this the right way, or do it over, or whatever, because we didn't do it right the first time, what difference does it make? It's just numbers. It's numbers that you are going to have to pay for. Somebody's going to have to pay for it. Or they're going to inflate it out of business, and then you're going to need $40,000 for a loaf of bread like they did in Germany. And people who've been saving your entire lives, you're boned, you're done. Let's not try to let that happen, shall we? We have to understand what's going on there. Nobody owns the money. So what can we do about that? Well, one thing we can do is we can talk about things like the Laffer Curve. Now, I have to tell you that being in an economics school with Statue of Liberty on the wall, which triggered me severely, by the way, on the way down here. Just being here is like being in Starfleet Academy to me. I suppose I should say the Jedi Temple. It's dealing with people who at least understand the fact that there are rules out there and that these rules cannot be broken and they can't be bent. You cannot fix a price for something that is different than what people are willing to pay. Because if you do, you're either going to end up with too much of something or not enough of something, and people will figure out a way to deal with both of those problems. So why do we need to talk about the Laffer Curve? Because it's important. The Laffer Curve is very simple. It basically says this, as an example with the federal government. You would think that if the federal government wanted to take in more money, the answer would be to raise taxes, but that's not necessarily true. The Laffer Curve says that if you lower taxes, the economy grows, and you get a bigger piece of a smaller pie, but the net income goes up. And there will come a point when you keep cutting taxes, the economy's growing, keep cutting taxes, finally you'll get to a point where that sliver of taxes is so small that if you keep going, the government starts taking in less money. But if you understand that we are way, way on the other side of that curve, if you understand that when we say we want to lower taxes, we're not saying we want to lower taxes to deprive all the people who depend on government money for what they need. We're saying if the government really wants more money to spend, the way to do it is lower taxes. It's better to have a small piece of a huge pie than it is to have a big piece of a very small pie. And people don't understand this. It's very simple, very simple. So we should cut the tax rate to whatever the maximum income rate for the government is. And then we have to hold them accountable to whatever spending standards we are to start to get this $20 trillion under control. One of the things I'm in favor of a lot is a flat tax of some kind. And I like a flat tax an awful lot for two reasons. First of all, I like a flat tax because everybody has skin in the game. Everybody has skin in the game. I'm talking about everybody paying the same percentage of a tax rate. So that way there's not a group of people voting for tax increases on other people. The second thing I like about a flat tax is it doesn't divide the world up into good people and evil people depending on whether they make $250,000 or only $249,999. The progressive tax code as it is today is set up with a bunch of tiers, and if you cross a certain tier, the percentage of the tax goes up significantly. And all that does is make people want to make less money, which means that there are less jobs. Bernie Sanders was talking about putting a 94% tax on anything above $414,000 of personal income. 94% tax. Now let's just assume for a moment that you go out there and you work your tail off and you've been busy and you've been working hard and you're spending 80-hour weeks or so on, and you find yourself making $400,000 or $500,000. What are you going to do when you find out that above $414,000 the government is going to come and they're going to take 96 of your pennies and leave you with 4 cents on the dollar? What are you going to do? You're going to make $413,999 that year. That's what you're going to do. I'll be damned, I will be damned if I'm going to work for somebody else and they're going to take 96% of what I make. I'm just going to give it to them. No, no, I will not do it. I'll just have to find a way to live on $413,999 and just squeeze myself to get by. Now, that may sound like a high-class problem, but if that tax rate wasn't there, what would I be doing? I'd be making as much money as I could or wanted to, which means that that extra money above that amount of money could go to what? Could go to growth. It could go to new trucks. It could go to new drivers, new employees, new everything. People getting jobs, getting paid, creating wealth that wasn't there before. These are all the kind of things that nobody talks about. Nobody talks about wealth creation. Nobody. They don't understand it. They don't have a clue. Wealth can be created out of thin air. It's created every time you have an idea that comes into the world, you've generated wealth. If there's an abandoned lot on a corner and it's run down and covered with trash, and you have a business plan for a dry cleaning store, and you are able to get the money to put that dry cleaning store into business, you have generated wealth that wasn't there before. That dry cleaning store is going to provide a service and money is going to come in. It just wasn't there before. You've made it out of thin air. The federal government spends about, roughly now, $4,000 billion a year. In 1863, at the height of the Civil War, total spending was $500 million. It's $500 million. And in 1863, Los Angeles looked like a couple of adobe huts with hitching posts. And I flew over it on the way out here. It's improved significantly since then. So where did it come from? Where did all that stuff come from? In 1863, if you arrived at a very, very, very big event and you were exceedingly rich and really, really wanted to show off in 1863, really show off, you might pull up to an event in a carriage drawn by 4 horses. I drive a carriage that's drawn by 306 horses, and I love it. And where did all that come from? Where did all the wealth come from? It was literally created from thin air by creativity and hard work. So we have to get out of the way of people doing that. It's very simple, really. And this is what freedom means, economic freedom, since we're starting with economics. Economic freedom to me means that you should be allowed to go out there and do as much or as little as you want to, but if you have an idea, then you should be allowed to find a way to bring that idea into the world and capitalize on it. This device has changed the planet, completely changed the planet. What is it that makes Apple a $1 trillion company? Is it the value of the glass and the metal in this thing? No, probably the materials in this, probably 30, 40 bucks. What is it? It's the idea. Steve Jobs started in a garage, thought people might want their own computers. I took it to IBM. IBM said, no way. We're not interested. So they started Apple Computer. When Jobs went to the engineers about the iPhone, he told them what they wanted, and they said, it's simply not possible, sir. And he said, you are fired. Out. Who here thinks they can build this? And no one knew how. No one knew how. Steve Jobs had the sense to put one of these in his pocket for about a week, and all of his keys and coins had scratched up the glass so much that he didn't read it anymore, didn't like the looks of it. He says, we have to make tougher glass. So, well, there is no tougher glass. Well, we're going to have to find a way to do it. And he did. And that's economic freedom. And everybody out there should have a chance to bring these ideas to the market. And by the way, and if you don't want to do that, that's fine. An entrepreneur is somebody who works 80 hours a week in order to avoid working 40 hours a week. And that's what it's all about. If you want to just have a job, if you want to just relax and watch football games, that's fine. It's absolutely great. But if you want to do something with ideas, you should be able to. And as I say, the flat tax doesn't divide between good and evil people either. We pay a flat tax all the time. Well, at least we do in California. We pay a flat tax all the time. So if we go out on a 4th of July barbecue and we go down to the grocery store, we pay a sales tax. What does that mean? Well, it means that if I decide to buy a bunch of steaks and a bunch of champagne and a bunch of other stuff, and I'm going to pay 7% sales tax, I'm going to be paying a lot more money than the person behind me who's buying hot dogs and beer. I'm going to be paying more money because I'm buying more stuff and more expensive stuff. But being in line on the 4th of July at a supermarket doesn't mean that I get to look at the person in front of me, tap him on the shoulder, ask him how much money he's got in his wallet, and expect him to pay half of my stuff if he has more than me, or I have to pay half of what the person behind me pays if they make less than me. That's what the gradated tax does. A fair tax, a flat tax means everybody pays the same percentage. Everybody's got skin in the game. If you want to raise taxes on people, that's fine, but you're raising taxes on yourself as well and your constituents and everything else. So these things I think would be enormously valuable. And just one other thing I might just tell you about this money that doesn't belong to anybody. The reason, I'm quite convinced of this, the reason that we owe 17 World Trade Centers worth of flat $100 bills is because of payroll withholding, I think. Any of you out there not had a paycheck before? Most of you have, right? You worked some kind of job, gotten a paycheck. Okay, so let's say they decide they're going to pay you $600 a week. So you get a job for $600 a week and you get your paycheck and you open up the envelope, but it's not $600, it's $430, something like that, right? And you understand where the money went. You don't have any problem with it. You understand that it went to the taxes. You understand that when you got a $600 a week job, your take home is $430. And that means that you never touch that money. But if you had to do what I do as a business owner, and that is 4 times a year, write a check for $20,000 to the federal government with money that's already in my bank account. If you had to part with your income tax with a check, with the money that you took, if you take home $600 every week and had to set it aside and pay it, there would be a revolution in this country. People would be in Washington with pitchforks and dogs and they'd burn the place down. They wouldn't stand for it. But because you never touch the money, they continue to take it and they continue to take more of it. And we put up with it because we never, ever touch it. And by touching it, I mean, we don't see it in our bank account and we don't see what we could be doing with that money if we didn't have to ship it off to Washington. We don't have a chance to do that because they're smart enough to never let you touch your own money. And they take this percentage and they put it away and they put it away and you file your income tax returns and your accountant says, hey, you might get a $300 refund in April. Woohoo! $300 refund, awesome, I'm getting a check. No, they're just giving you back a sliver of the money that they took from you without you even knowing it. So I would get rid of that as well. Let's move on to education. Baltimore is a catastrophe. Detroit's a catastrophe. Newark, St. Louis, parts of Chicago, all of this. Does anybody want to take a rough guess at how much money we spend per student in the Baltimore school system per year? In Baltimore, in 2015, per student, we spent $15,700 per student per year. 4% of the population of the school district in Baltimore can read at an appropriate grade level. 4% can read. $15,700 per student per year, and they can't educate those people to save their lives. Something's going on here. Something's going on here. We spend 4 times as much money as the next closest developed country on education, and our scores continue to go down. Why? It's not a rhetorical question, it's a real question. Why? Why? Why is it that if you take a look at test scores and Department of Education spending, you find that the more we spend, the worse we do? Why is that? Because it's the same reason that we spent all this money, because nobody owns it. The education system is not designed to produce educated people. It's designed to produce graduates. That's what gets paid for. It doesn't pay for educations, it pays for graduates. And that is a critical distinction because, as we're going to find out, we get what we pay for. And in the United States of America, we're not paying for an education, we're paying for a graduation. So what does that mean? It means it doesn't matter how well or badly educated you are, we get paid by the number of people who we graduate. The more students we graduate, the more money we get. Folks, that's like having a factory where you don't get paid for the product, you get paid for how many boxes you ship out the door. And it doesn't matter if the stuff in the boxes is good or the stuff in the boxes are broken, and it doesn't even matter if there's nothing in the box. You're getting paid by the box out the door. And until we understand that we're paying for boxes out the door and not what's in the boxes, we're going to continue to spend more and more money and have less and less and less educated people. It's a catastrophe. You have to do something about it. You have to do something about it. One thing you could do, is you could attach the money that we're already spending. I'm not saying I think we're spending far too much, but let's just say we're not talking about cutting spending. Let's just say, what could we do with the money we're taking now? You could basically take the $15,700 that they spend on every kid in the Baltimore school system and put it in an envelope and pin it to his clothes and send him home and say, you get $15,000 of money to spend on schooling for this year. Can't spend it on anything else, have to spend it on schooling. Do you really think that 4% of the people in Baltimore would be able to read at a 7th grade level if they're 7th graders, if they each had $15,000 to spend on their own education? And why is it that the poorest people in America, the people in the inner cities who've been just absolutely destroyed by these policies, why is it that they want vouchers at a rate of 9 to 1, something like that? Every time they open a charter school, which is open for money and capitalism and competition, the poor people, who everybody talks about feeling sorry for, form a line around the block because they would like to be a part of this program. They'd like to be a part of this program for the same reason that you would like to be a part of this program, for the same reason you're here. You want an education, you want to spend as little money as you can and get the best education you possibly come out with. Everybody wants this. These people in these cities are no different. But because nobody owns the money, $15,700 per student per year disappears into this hole. Where does it go? That's the real question. This is an example, and it's an extreme example, but it gives you an idea. There was on the Detroit school board a man whose name I've actually genuinely forgotten. But as an employee of the, as a head employee, a member of the city council, he decided that it was appropriate to his station to ride around in a brand new Lincoln Navigator. So using the Department of Education's money, he bought a brand new Lincoln Navigator with a gray interior. But when the car arrived, I'm not making this up because I don't have this kind of imagination, but when the brand new Lincoln Navigator with the black leather interior arrived on school funds, he said he wanted a gray interior, not a black interior. So they bought a second one, and they paid a $15 rush fee so that he could get his car with the gray leather sooner rather than later. Now, I'm not saying all the teachers do that by any means, but I'm saying that this is the system that we've created. We've created a system where $10 billion, that's $10,000 million, more money than all of us together, more money than Midland is probably going to pay in taxes for the next 100 years, is gone in a rounding error. Where did it go? We don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, we thought there was $229 billion in this account, but there's only 219. Well, where did the $10,000 million go? Don't know. Gone. So I feel bad about it. I really do. Sorry. We are so wealthy. We are so wealthy that we can waste money at this rate, and we can have the people that do this kind of things to us take about half of what we make, and we don't go into the streets with rifles because we live so well. We're so wealthy, we're so comfortable. Most of you out there, most of you students, and this is a point of pride, I'm not trying to be disparaging at all. You are the product of a civilization that has been so successful that you've never been cold, you've never been hungry, you've never been without entertainment, and you've never been in pain, unless it's a quick accidental pain, in which case you go to a hospital. You have lived a life of absolute incredible wealth as a result of all of the systems that got us to this place, and we are undermining these systems, and the foundation that keeps all of this up is rotting away, and you don't know it. And the worst, there's only one thing that's worse than going down into your basement and finding out that the basement of your house is completely, absolutely eaten out by termites. There's only one thing worse than going down there and finding out that your own house is destroyed by termites. And the only thing worse than that is not going down there and finding out that your house is destroyed by termites, because the second you realize that you've got a serious termite problem, that's the instant things start getting better instead of continuing to get worse. So that's why we have to bring this bad news. This is why we have to talk about the reality of this. Politicians buy votes by giving people what they want in exchange for their votes. I'm not here to talk about Republicans or Democrats. I'm not here to make any distinction between any of this. That's what we buy. That's what we pay for. If you vote for me, I'll give you this. Where does it come from? The government doesn't make anything. It doesn't make anything. When the government paves a freeway, the government doesn't pay for that. The government pays a private construction firm to pave the freeway. They don't make anything. Where does the money go? I don't know. You might find out. So I also want to spend a moment talk about higher education. I have to tell you, I had a great deal of apprehension coming here today. I really did, for the first time in my life. Last time I spoke at a college was at Steve Austin University in Natchitoches, Texas. I thought East Texas was going to be about as conservative as it possibly could be. And there were 4 or 5 social justice warriors in there, led by a shaggy guy in the front row who I call Malibu Trotsky. If Trotsky had grown up in Malibu, this is exactly what he would have looked like. Kind of a groovy, kind of a shirt, you know, the goatee, the wire rim glasses, but especially the rage. And I started speaking for about 3 minutes. Is why don't you start talking about why you did this and this and this? And I just let the guy run with it. And he wouldn't shut up. And a strange calm came over me, because normally I'm not this nice of a guy. But I just go, knock yourself out. And in a room full of social justice warriors, we ended up talking about things like, why is inner city crime so bad? Why? Why? We started talking about the idea that we're moving from an industrial age to an information age, and that the jobs that were done by people in inner cities for industry are becoming fewer, and there's nothing that we can do about that, so what do we do? And I was starting to have a conversation with these people, and Malibu Trotsky said, hey man, what is it with all these long answers? Seriously. He couldn't stand the fact that we were having a conversation, that we were trying to get to the root causes, we're trying to get down to the brass tacks. Why do things happen? Why? Why do we have the crime that we have in inner cities? Why? There is an answer for all these things. Don't have time to get into them now, but there's an answer. And if you don't care, if you don't really care, you'll just say, oh, I'm in favor of helping the poor. I think we should spend more taxes. Well, we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars. How's that worked out? In the mid-50s, Baltimore was a beautiful city. And everybody owned their own houses. And black and white families lived right next to each other, and they had outdoor barbecues, and everybody could leave their doors unlocked, and everybody was happy because everybody was working. And there was none of this. None of this. I know it's an old saw, but it's absolutely true. I've got a picture here that I can't show you, but it's a picture of a very ordinary intersection in a small Japanese town. And it's a bank and a gas station, a couple of vans, and so on. And that intersection, which is absolutely normal, is precisely the spot that the atomic bomb was detonated over in August of 1945, and Hiroshima looks like Disneyland. At nighttime, Hiroshima is a beautiful city filled with beautiful glass buildings. It's clean, it's spotless, people are working, they're happy. Detroit looks like Hiroshima in 1945. There's a reason for this. What's the reason? What's the reason? There is a reason. And it has to do with the politics of dependency. It has to do with the entire idea of convincing people that we're going to give you a better life by having you depend on us. And after 80 years, it's been 80 years in Detroit. It's been 80 years in Detroit since Detroit has had either a Republican mayor or a Republican city council. 80 years of uninterrupted Democratic rule in Detroit, and the place looks like a wasteland. Now again, I'm not blaming that on the Democrats, I'm blaming it on politics. I'm blaming it on how the system is set up. We get what we pay for. And if nobody owns the money and nobody accounts for the money, and people take the money to buy Lincoln Navigators, well, that's what we paid for. That's the system we've built. That's the system that's there. That's why there's poverty. That's why we're spending $15,000 per student in Baltimore or Detroit, and they can't read, because that's what we're paying for. That's what we've set up. So if we don't get to what we're actually paying for, if we don't get to for how this system is set up, we can talk all we want to and have all the bumper stickers we want to, but it takes actual courage to talk about what is actually wrong. And the only reason I do that is because I genuinely actually care about these people. And I do what I do because I hate injustice. It drives me insane, and I can't bear to watch it. So I get called a racist and a Nazi because I'm talking about the underlying reasons why the crime is so high in those cities. And that is because I care about these people. I care about them enough to try to find out what the hell is actually going on so we can put an end to it. It wasn't like this before. If it had been like this forever, you could say, well, that's the way it is. But it wasn't like this before. In the 50s and 60s, Baltimore was a garden. And so was Detroit. It was the pride of the West. It was a spectacular place. Mark Twain Library was brand new, and people of all different colors came, and they spent time in there, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then guess what? The Mark Twain Library has been abandoned for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 years now, and people have gone in there, and they've stripped the wire. They've stripped the copper wire out of the walls, and the only thing that they didn't steal from the library was the books. And why is the Mark Twain Library now a completely soaking wet, utterly destroyed museum of former situation? Why does it look like The Walking Dead in there? Why? Why does it look like a bomb has gone off? Well, because the $13 million that was appropriated to fix the leaky ceiling on the Mark Twain Library didn't get to the Mark Twain Library. I don't know where it went, but it didn't get to the library. So, the hole in the ceiling, the water, the ruin, the closure, boom. And another piece of Detroit goes down the toilet. Why? It's enough to drive you just drive you insane. It's enough to drive you completely insane. To realize how simple these solutions are, and to realize how enormous this thing is. But it's actually not something that's been this way forever. We built it. We created it. We created it by making so much wealth that we don't care how much people take from us, and we don't care where it goes. So Detroit looks like a bombed out inner city. It's the third world. It's an extremely dangerous place to be. And that's what we're paying for. That's what we're buying. That's our product. So we better think pretty carefully about why we spend the money we spend. Why do we spend it the way we spend it? And maybe we could start thinking about finding a way to spend for things that did us some good, like actual education, actual law and order, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, let's talk briefly about immigration. People often accuse conservatives of being anti-immigrant, and that's just an absolute out lie. I'm engaged to an immigrant. I'm not against immigrants. I'm against illegal immigration, and there's a number of reasons why. Let me start with the most obvious one. Illegal immigration is spitting in the eye of the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of honest people who have spent 6, 7 years of their lives and more money than they could ever scrape together to do things legally the right way. If you simply say to somebody who is in Thailand, let's say, that yes, it's true, you've basically taken your life savings and you've been filling out forms and waiting in line for 7 or 8 years, and it's cost you $9,000, which is everything you own, you stupid sap. If you just gone to Mexico, you could have walked over and everything would be groovy. That's not fair. It's not right. It's inappropriate. There's that. But the more important thing is this. Why do people come to America in the first place? Why? Why is all the immigration coming here? Why aren't Americans going over the border and climbing over the wall and walking through the wilderness at night to get to Mexico? Why? Well, because Mexico's economy is a disaster. Is it because the Mexican people aren't hardworking? I live in Los Angeles. I've never seen harder working people than the Mexicans, ever. I've never seen people work that hard, ever. It's because the Mexican government is incredibly corrupt. So people come over here. They're coming here to escape lawlessness. They're coming here to escape an economy and an economic situation that is not based on the law. It's based on who you know and how much money you can send to them to grease their palms. That's why they're coming here. They're coming here to get away from lawlessness. And if the first thing you do when you come here is commit a lawless act, I don't see how this really makes much sense. I don't see it. Now, I don't believe either, needless to say, that people who've been here for 30 or 40 years, people who were born here, people who weren't even born when their parents made the decision, we can't just throw those people out. We are not that kind of people. What we need to do is we need to figure out what's fair. What's fair to those people? What's fair to the people who've waited in line? What's fair? What is fair? To me, what's fair is this. I think you need to ask the people in this country who are here illegally, you say this to them, basically. All right. These days of you living in the shadows are over. These days of you being afraid are over. But also the days of this continuing to go on are over. So what do we do now? Here's what I think we do. You have a choice now to decide whether or not you want to do one of three things. Whether or not you want to go back home, whether or not you want to apply as a guest worker, or whether or not you want to become a U.S. citizen. Those are the choices. If you want to go back home, that's easily arranged. But since you haven't already, we can assume that you want to stay here. So, do you want to stay here as a Mexican, or do you want to become an American? Because the most beautiful thing about this country by far, and the thing that tears me up every time, is seeing people from all around the world, many of whom don't speak very much English at all, who've gone through this process legally and are standing there in front of a judge, and they raise their right hands, and they say the oath of citizenship, and those people are as American as people whose families got off the Mayflower. It's a miracle. It's a miracle because this country is an idea. The whole idea, America's an idea. It's not ground. You could take the idea of America, put it anywhere in the world, and anybody can be part of that club. But in order to be part of that club, you have to play by the rules of the club. So I would say to the illegal immigrants here, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a Mexican or Nicaraguan, Guatemalan, whatever? Do you want to be a Mexican living in America? If you do, there's going to have to be a guest worker card, and that's how we're going to have to deal with that. If you want to become a U.S. citizen, great. That's what we would like. But we can't just give it to you, because that's not fair to all the people that waited in line. If you want to be a U.S. citizen, you are now at the back of the line, and you will have to go through the same procedures that anybody else coming into this country as a citizen are. My fiance is 3 years away from this, and thousands of dollars. And that's the most fair solution I can come up with. But it's a solution, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. When you ask me what kind of immigration policy I'd like for America, my answer is very simple. I think America should adapt word for word, the immigration policy of Mexico. I would be very happy if that were the case. If the United States were to adopt the immigration policy of the Mexican Republic, here are some of the things that the Mexican immigration laws state. First of all, you have to be here legally or you're immediately deported. Secondly, in order to be an immigrant into Mexico, you have to have means of sustaining yourself. You have to be able to prove that you're not going to be a burden on the government. Third, it says you're not allowed to be a burden on society. Fourth, you have to be of good character with no criminal records. This is what Mexico requires for people to come into their country. Fifth, it says you have to be able to contribute to the general well-being. Sixth, it says they keep a constant record of every single immigrant, where they are, what they're doing, and so on. And this is the one that I like the most. Foreigners in Mexico are utterly forbidden to be engaged in Mexican politics, and if they do engage in Mexican politics, they're immediately thrown out of the country. Because the Mexican people have decided that they don't want people from other countries determining their own policy. Seems reasonable enough to me. If you help somebody coming into the country illegally, that's a felony. If you use a false name, that's a felony. You might be interested to know that on the southern border of Mexico, 400,000 people per year go into Mexico. It's a country with a much smaller population than we have. About 170,000 of those people are caught. In 2016, we were able to determine that 322 people died on the Mexican border trying to get into this country. They died of exposure or perhaps murder. The people that they paid to bring them in either killed them or left them there, or they got lost or whatever. I understand these people. They're looking for a better life. They're trying to feed their family. I've seen Mexicans in Los Angeles. They work like animals. Everything they make goes back home. I don't want to see those people dying out in the desert. I really don't. I'd like Mexico to get its act together and have an economy, but that's a different story. But 322 people in 2016 died on the border from Mexico coming into the United States. During that same year, the number of people going from Guatemala into Mexico was 20,000 people died that year getting into Mexico from Guatemala. 20,000 people died that year. Something's not right here. And if we just knew these facts, we're grown-ups, we're adults, we can reason. If you knew this information, you could come to your own conclusion. Let's move on a little bit and talk about defense, because the favorite part of the events by far is a Q&A afterwards for me. Talking about defense, our technological lead in defense is rapidly eroding. Espionage and so on, the Chinese basically reverse engineer everything we make, and the same for the Russians back in the day. We no longer have the technological edge that we once had in terms of defense. Nothing like it. It's eroded very badly because of our laxity with things like national security secrets and storing top-level diplomatic messages on an unsecure server in a bathroom in New York, for example. So that information is gone, and once it's gone, the trillions of dollars and decades that we spent on things like stealth technology or whatever are theirs for free. And they've got it. We paid for it, they've got it. We live in a world where our defense problem is not destroying enemies, it's finding them. We can make anything in the world that we want to hit go away. We have to find out where is the enemy, where are they hiding? And since they know us and our decency, more often than not, they're hiding in civilian populations. And if they're in the middle of a civilian population, we will not strike them. I have good friends of mine who were F-16 pilots. They're currently down in Tampa. And time again, they came back to base with their bombs under their wings, not because they didn't know whether or not the bad guys were there, but because there was some doubt about whether or not there were innocent people there. And if there were innocent people, they came back home. So these are the problems we face. We're facing enemies that use our own morality and decency as their shield. How do we deal with that? I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to bomb civilians, and neither do the pilots. They will not drop those weapons. They will not. So what do? I don't know. But I do know that we have to start thinking about things differently, because there's an old saw, and it's really true, and that is that generals are always preparing to win the last war. Always. They're always preparing to fight the last war. So we have 11 aircraft carrier groups, because the last time that this country was really in an existential problem for its life, it was with the Empire of Japan and their vast fleets of battleships and aircraft carriers and airplanes and so on. So we've prepared ourselves against an invasion fleet very, very well. Very well. And you'll not be surprised to know that with 11 carrier groups, I don't think there's much problem with the Empire of Japan or anybody else coming to America and bombing Pearl Harbor. That's not going to happen. But what is going to happen? What is going to happen? We don't know. This is a defense problem now. The scariest thing that you don't know about until now was this. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was a relay station in the southern part of Silicon Valley, up near San Francisco. You've seen them everywhere. It was a high-powered station where incoming electrical lines from the power plants are distributed out to various lines that then lead to your house and so on. And somewhere back in 2013 or 14, a group of individuals fired a number of rounds of AK-47s, just regular high-powered rifles, and they shot at the cooling systems for these installations. Now, they destroyed all the cooling systems, and they also cut all of the wires that allow that building to communicate with the outside world, except for one that they missed. There was one that they didn't know about. This is absolutely true. So they shot up these cooling towers because if they shoot up the cooling towers, the transformers are going to melt under the heat. And if the transformers melt from the heat, bad things are going to happen, which I'll explain to you in a minute. But there was one communication line out of there that they didn't see, and the guys running the electric company were able to shut down those transformers and make them safe. If they had not done that, Silicon Valley and all of San Francisco would have been without electricity for 6 months at a minimum. Minimum. This isn't a nuclear weapon. This isn't a big army of terrorists. This is probably 5 or 6 guys who knew where our bottlenecks were, where our weaknesses were, and acted on it. And just by sheer luck, we got away with it. Because the electrical system of our country, every one of these transformers is different. Isn't that good to know? Isn't it good to know that of all the power stations around the country, there's not like a supply of these things on a shelf that you switch them in. Every single one is custom made. Every single one has to be built specifically for that place. These are the kind of things that we have to start thinking about in terms of defense now going forward. By the way, I talked about spending, and I just want to say this. We have to change the way we buy weapons in this country. Now, I'm a big military guy. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I've always had I hang out with fighter pilots and military. I think it's important. But the way we buy weapons is just barking mad. It's absolutely crazy. The F-35 fighter has cost about $1 trillion. That's $1,000 billion for 200-300 of these airplanes. $1 trillion is 100 aircraft carriers. 100 fully equipped aircraft carriers. That's what these planes cost. And you know why they cost $1 trillion? Because that's what we're paying them for them to charge them. That's the economic system we've set up. We bought the F-35 on something called cost plus, which means that we say to Lockheed, in the old days, in the 50s and 60s, when there were 35 of these aerospace companies, we say, guys, we need a new fighter plane. We're going to have a fly-off in 3 years. Give us your best stuff, and whichever one of you does the best job, we're going to buy 500 of those airplanes. And all these companies would go make their test models on their own dime, and they'd fly them off, and the winner was the one who got the $500 million. That's how you would build a porch, right? That's how you would build something like an extension onto your house. You would take bids, best job, highest quality, lowest price, you win. That's not how we buy the F-35 or anything else. We buy with cost plus. That means that what we say to Lockheed is, here's how we're going to pay you. Whatever the airplane system costs, we're going to pay all of that plus, let's say, 6%. So whatever the F-35 costs, we're going to pay that plus 6%. Now, if the F-35 costs $100 billion, and you get 6% of that, that's one number. 6% of $1,000 billion is a bigger number. So every incentive Lockheed has is to make this process take as long as possible and be as expensive as possible, because the longer they wait and the more money they spend, the more money they get after cost plus. Why we pay for this is utterly beyond me, but we do. These are the things that we could change and get this spending under control. I'm getting a little tired. I know you are too. We'll get to some questions, so we can just wrap up two more, which are very important, I think. Let's start with healthcare. If you get an insurance bill, if you have to go to stay at a hospital, and let's say you've got private insurance, you may find that during the course of your hospital stay, maybe you had a headache or something was hurting, and a nurse came in and administered an aspirin. They gave you a bare aspirin pill, an uncoated aspirin pill. If you look at the aspirin pill on a bill for the insurance company, you will see that every single time they gave you an aspirin pill, they charge $20. If, on the other hand, you go down to Walmart and you buy 100 of these pills in a bottle, they cost about 2 cents each. So, why is it that an aspirin pill, which costs 2 cents at Walmart, the exact same pill from the exact same bottle, why does that 2-cent aspirin cost $20? If we can understand that, we can understand our way out of this problem. The main reason it costs this way is because of this horrible intersection between government and big business. Everybody's guilty here. So what we find out today is if they take $1 from me through taxation for healthcare, for my healthcare, they take $1 out of my wallet, that dollar goes to Washington, and the standing army of bureaucrats and all of the people in the Department of Health and so on, all these other things have to be paid. They peel about a third of that dollar away. They keep about 30 cents, 35 cents. And then that, let's say 66 cents, goes to the insurance companies. And they have standing armies of millions of people. And they take another 30 cents. So for every dollar that comes out of my wallet, the doctor's office, not the doctor, the doctor's office gets 34 cents. And the doctor has to hire one person full-time who does nothing but deal with the Washington people, and another person full-time who does nothing but deal with the insurance people. And I've been in the waiting room in doctors' offices and had nurses slam phones down and say, can we please just do some goddamn medicine around here, please? Because all they do is fill out forms. So now you've got a doctor who's basically studied for 20 years, 25 years, something like that. He's put his entire life into it. While you're all out there partying, and while I was out there partying, I was a theater major, and I know that being a theater major is not as hard as being an engineering major, and it's not as hard as being a medical major. I understand that. So while I'm out there having fun, these people are studying. And now they find themselves getting 33 cents on the dollar. So what do they have to do? In order to make the same amount of money, they have to see 3 times as many people, which is why you get your 2.5 minutes on the butcher table when you go in there. Wait in the waiting room, wait in this room, 45 minutes later, what's wrong? This. Okay, thanks, we'll run this test, gone. It's because it's what we pay for. There's so many things wrong with this. But back in the olden days, when I was a boy, the olden days of maybe 30 years ago, if you had a sprained ankle, you could go to the doctor's office and you would sit on the table and the doctor would say, let me see it. And you'd roll up your leg and he'd feel it a little bit and he says, you have a sprained ankle. That'll be $50. Now, if you have a sprained ankle, you will go down to the medical center and you will wait. And a doctor will come in and he'll feel it and he'll say, I think you've got a sprained ankle, but if I misdiagnose this, I'm going to lose my entire career. So even though I know it's a sprained ankle, we're going to send you in for an MRI. That'll be $3,000, please. Why are we giving doctors 30 cents? Why don't we just give them the whole doctor? And why is it that the Democrats or the people, and not just Democrats, I got to keep catching myself, the people who vote for things like universal health care, why do they like cars better than people? Why do these big state people like automobiles better than people? They're always talking about people and they're always talking about how bad cars are, but they love cars and they hate people. And the reason I know this to be true is because in California, my car has about 200 different insurance options, and I have 3. My car is smart enough to decide how much of a deductible it wants to pay. And my car is smart enough to decide how much coverage it wants. And my car is able to say you can afford this but not this. And my car has 200 people at any given time, competing with each other to offer me the most coverage for the least amount of money, and that's what my car gets, but I don't get any of those things. I am forced into a program that charges me for things like mammograms, which I don't particularly need myself, and I have to pay for all this. Why does my car get more choices than I do? Why? Because it's what we're paying for. It's what we've set up. For people who talk about socialized medicine, who like the idea of universal health care, I can tell you as a conservative that if you're arguing for this because there are people that are not covered under private health care, I can tell you I speak for the entire conservative half of the nation when I would say, just get the government out of the health care system, and if it turns out there's 8 million Americans who are not covered, we will pay their private insurance premiums out of taxes. We will do that rather than what you're trying to do. Because, little details here are kind of important. Detroit has more MRIs than all of Canada. Canada has a national health care system, and so does Great Britain. In Canada, you have to wait probably 10 months for an MRI. People come across the border and they get their health care twice. They pay for it in Canada from their taxes, and then they pay for it when they come down here because they'd like to have it taken care of. I talked to a guy who ran a cancer lab, research lab in Montreal. Sorry, yes, it was Montreal. And he said to me, Bill, I run a cancer lab and I'm part of the National Health Service. And every week of my life, I get a letter or email that sounds exactly like this. Dear Dave, I have stage 4 cancer. My wife has stage 4 cancer. My daughter, whoever, has stage 4 cancer. And National Health Service says that there's no treatment for them. They've given them morphine pills. They've given them medication so they go home and die in peace. Is there anything that you can do? And he says, let me see the results. And he gets the results. And he says 9 times out of 10, he says, there's a program at the University of Tennessee where they're doing some experimental stuff that's showing maybe a 25% survival rate. Are you interested? Yes, I am interested. Yes, I'm very interested in having a 1 in 4 chance of surviving or a 1 in 4 chance of my child surviving. I'm very interested. And he said something to me I never forgot. He said, in Canada, you die when the government decides you're dead, but in America, you're not dead till you're in the ground. And I like that very much. I like that very much. And I'll tell you what I don't like. I don't like the example of Charlie Gard. Anybody know who Charlie Gard is? Charlie Gard was a little boy who died about, I want to say almost a month and a half ago. Charlie Gard had a rare birth defect, and he was a British subject, so he went to the National Health Service in Britain. The National Health Service is the single-payer government health care plan that so many people think would be great here. Charlie Gard had this very rare birth defect and a very expensive birth defect, and the National Health Service says, we cannot help him. We cannot help him. The chances of his recovery are very slim, and we cannot dedicate resources to this guy, to this little boy. So unfortunately, he's going to have to go home and we'll give him some pills so he can die in peace. Well, the parents, for some reason, weren't satisfied with that answer. For some reason, they weren't satisfied with watching their little boy die in peace, so they got on the internet and started looking around for this particular condition. And as it turns out, there was an American doctor that had an experimental treatment plan, and it was showing tremendous success. So the parents of Charlie Gard said, we would like our son to go over to America and at least try this experimental treatment. And you don't have to pay for anything. People found out about the case. They raised something like $1 million in charity to get this kid over to this doctor to get this treatment. And the National Health Service would not let him leave the hospital. And they fought it in the courts, and they fought it in the courts, and weeks went by, and the parents could not take that child out of the hospital. They would not allow them to legally. The police were there preventing them from taking that child to the hospital, out of the hospital, and sending him for this treatment. It's an absolutely true story. And finally, little Charlie Gard died. But about 3 days before he died, the doctor who had offered to provide some treatment back at his own facility came over to Britain and said, I know this is going to break your heart, but if I'd had this kid 5 weeks earlier, I think I could have done something. But no. So why did the National Health Service kill this kid? Because there's no question that's what happened. There's no question about it. And they know that they did it. Why? Because if this kid had gone to that doctor and had survived after the state has said, no, you're dead, you just have to accept it, that would have shown everybody in the country exactly what they've got there, which is a world where somebody who decides how much things cost determines whether you get to live or die, or your boy, or your little girl, or your mom, or whatever. This is the thing that we find so abhorrent here, which is why I'm telling you I'd much rather pay private insurance companies for people who don't have the coverage. And I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Finally, I'll just talk about this. A lot of people out there now are talking about how great it would be to be a socialist in this country. And a lot of people in the last election were saying, we like Bernie. We like Bernie because Bernie's the real deal. We like Bernie because socialism is fair and it doesn't have this income inequality. Well, Bernie Sanders has 3 houses. Any other questions that I can answer for you? Bernie Sanders has 3 houses. Somebody had the audacity to say, well, he works really hard. And I said, duh. Yes, of course he does. He doesn't, but let's say he did. Let's say he did. 3 houses. How do you explain this? You can't explain it using their theory, but you can explain it using my theory, which is that socialism is something that decent people like the sound of because they don't like seeing innocent people suffering, and it is a ruse for professional con artists to get into power. And if you don't believe me, let's take the example of Fidel Castro, who was the big champion of the left. He stood up to the Yankees and fought against the American people for 60 years, and he was defiant, and they never broke him, and they never got him down. And Fidel Castro ruled over a country with trillions of dollars of health resorts and beautiful beaches, and nothing developed anywhere. But it was okay that they were still driving 1950 Studebakers in Havana in 2016. That was okay because while everybody was poor, at least nobody was richer than anybody else, and that's the main thing. Okay. I think it's nuts, but okay. Fidel Castro died. You know how much money he had in his personal bank account? He had $800 million in his personal bank account. That's what the socialist champion had when he died. In his personal bank account, he had $800 million that he stole from the Cuban people and let them starve so that he could make $800 million in his bank account. That doesn't include the money he spent during his lifetime. That's what the Castros had in their bank accounts when they were running this people's revolution. So I'll just close with a little story that everybody can relate to. I've been to Cuba 2 times. I've been to Guantanamo Bay twice, voluntarily as it turns out. And I have friends who were in Havana just a few months ago. And when they were in Havana, they talked to the cab driver, because now we don't have the sanctions anymore. The cab driver was available for our friends who were movie producers. This one individual was available 24 hours a day. He parked wherever they were. If they were in the hotel, he slept in his car. If they went someplace in a restaurant, he stayed in his car. He was with them 24 hours a day because he was a taxi driver, and it was very rare and unusual to be allowed to be a taxi driver under the Castro system in Cuba. So here's the math. The Castros, in the form of the Cuban government, pay every Cuban citizen $50 a month, but he was a taxi driver, which is a little more important, so he got $100 a month. $100 a month was his guaranteed wage from the government of Cuba. And in order to maintain his position as a taxi driver, he had to pay a licensing fee. And his licensing fee that had to be paid to the Castros was $6,000 a month. He had to come up with $6,000 a month in order to pay the government so that he could continue to be a taxi driver. And in order to make that kind of money, he has to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So why does he do it? He does it because being a 24-hour-a-day taxi driver is still a better life than the life that people who aren't taxi drivers have down in Cuba. And that money didn't go to the starving Cuban people, and it didn't go to healthcare clinics. It went to the Castros. It went to Fidel, who suckered everybody, just like Bernie suckered everybody. Oh, how is it just terrible? Somebody have more houses than other people. Well, I've got 3 houses, but don't let that affect your decision any. It's a con game. And I have an opinion on socialism, and maybe somebody who's a socialist has a different opinion on socialism. And they're 2 opinions, and they're worthless. I'm just bloviating over here, and you're just bloviating over there. Opinions are, well, you know what they're like. Everybody has an opinion. Nobody cares. But there's something that's not an opinion, and that is this. I have flown to Cuba from from Jacksonville, and I have seen the Straits of Florida. It's 90 miles wide, the distance between Cuba and the tip of South Florida. And from 30,000 feet, that is a big hunk of water, a big hunk of water. I grew up in Miami. I got there when I was 12. I left there when I was 28 or something like that. And I met a lot of Cuban refugees. And a lot of those people who came over here later in the boats made the trip, and a lot of other people made the trip, but they didn't get here. And they got swept out to sea. They got swept out into the Gulf of Mexico, or more likely out into the Gulf Stream up the coast, and people whose families were as important to them as your families are to you. I don't know if you're on good terms with your family. If most of you are, that's great. Imagine your family. If you don't like them, imagine yourself with people that you do like. 6 or 7 of them on a boat that's made out of inner tubes that are lashed together with maybe a couple of chase lounges on them, strapped together, leaky boats with duct tape on the outside, and the whole family, mom, dad, grandma, the little girl, the boys, everybody, gets in the boat to come to America. Now, during the entire history of the relationship with communist Cuba, there has never been a dentist in Fort Lauderdale who took his family to the beach, strapped a bunch of inner tubes together, put a couple of chairs on the top, shoved off into 90 miles of shark-infested water in order to get to the free health care and literacy in Cuba. It has never happened. If 60% of the rafts were coming our way and 40% were going that way, that would indicate that we have a better system. But it's not 60-40. And it's not 90-10. And it's not 95-5. And it's not 99-1. It's not like there are 99 rafts coming to America for every raft leaving. It's 100%. 100% of the people who have actually lived under socialism and who are willing to risk their lives to get away from it, 100% of them want to come here as opposed to wanting to go there. You know the number of people that were shot going over the Berlin Wall trying to escape into East Germany? 0. 0. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. And that's a fact by people who are risking their lives on which economic and political system they want to live with. And all of those people that got swept out to sea, the hundreds of thousands of people that had to watch their grandmother slip underneath the waves or watch their 2-year-old daughter be torn apart by sharks, those people, this was not a theoretical argument for them. They weren't professors in Harvard faculty lounge talking about how swell socialism is. They lived under socialism, and they risked their lives, in many cases gave their lives, in order to get away from it. You can be a socialist in America because of the capitalist foundation of socialism makes it sound great. Oh, we're socialists, we're great, we're Bernie supporters, we're socialists. Well, if you're a socialist, then how come you still got an iPhone? Because if you're a socialist, you really do believe from each according to his ability to each according to his need. How dare you sit there and be a socialist with an iPhone? That iPhone is probably worth, what, $600? We could take it to a pawn shop, get $400 for it. What is that? That's $40, $20 bills? I can't do the math. $400, $40 $10 bills, right? So take your iPhone, hawk it, go downtown, distribute the money to the poor people. Because these socialists are all about wealth redistribution when it's somebody else's money coming to them, but when it's time for their money to go to people who are in worse shape than them, suddenly they're rock-ribbed capitalists just like I am. And the nice part of my job is I get to say one thing, and then I get to do the exact same thing. Thanks very much for having me, and I'd love to answer questions for as long as you guys want to. Any questions? Most of you have the good sense to want to get out of here.
Just to add to your economic thing on how much the 20 trillion is, the government in unfunded liabilities is more like 200 plus trillion.
Okay.
So every man, woman, and child, a child born today in the United States, owes already $165,000, $170,000.
That's what you owe coming into the world in this country. You have a $160,000 tab that you have to pay.
Unfunded liability is something that you have to pay for in the future, like your automobile or something like that. But at some point, you have to pay for that automobile or they take it back.
That's right. That's right. It's a catastrophe. And you know what it's like? It's like being on board the Titanic and having somebody in the crow's nest say, iceberg right ahead. And the iceberg is 80 miles away on the horizon. And it takes you 5.5 hours to get to the iceberg, but you keep steering straight for it. And you go straight forward, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's iceberg right ahead. And they keep on going, and then they hit the iceberg and the ship goes down and everybody says, what a catastrophe. We know it's there. We have to deal with it. Anybody else? Oh. Okay, and then we'll just go home, why don't we? I'm hotter here than I am in California. It's 115 degrees back there. Has the microphone left the building? Because if it has, I'll leave the building too. No, there it is. Okay.
Why haven't you ran for president?
Because if because in order to run for president, I'd have to be a politician, and I'd like to be able to face myself in the morning. I'd like to be able to look in the mirror every day when I shave and brush my teeth and say, you haven't sold your soul for this or that. And I'd love to tell you, and I did believe this for a while, that it was really the Republicans versus the Democrats. But at the very least now we've seen Republicans who promised us if we got Republicans to take over the Congress and the Senate, the House, and the presidency, this national health care thing would be repealed and all of these premiums would go away and we'd let capitalism and competition get into healthcare and all the rest. So in 2010, I was out there in Tea Party events and keeping people fired up, and we got the House of Representatives. And then in 2014, I'm out there speaking, and we got people fired up, and we got the Senate as well. And then in 2016, I'm not quite as much out there, not quite as much fired up, because I'm beginning to think this whole thing is silly. And I got to tell you, I thought for sure she was going to win, for sure. But we got the presidency. And now that we have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, ain't nobody doing nothing. Nobody's doing anything at all. So I'm not a politician because I would like to have some effect. And it's not the Republicans versus the Democrats. It's not the conservatives versus the liberals. It's people inside the Beltway versus us. Did you ever wonder why it is? Well, you seem like a very decent person, so probably it's never occurred to you. But why is it, do you think, that so many politicians treat re-election as if it's the last helicopter out of Saigon, as if they got to hold on to this re-election thing with all their might? If they don't get re-elected, it's the end of the world. Why is that? Well, it's because the kind of people, as a general rule, who want to be politicians are people who are either too lazy or too stupid to make their own money. But if I knock on some doors for a while and I get elected to Congress, next thing you know, I'm going to travel in limousines everywhere, and I'm going to be called the honorable gentleman from the great state of this, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to go out to dinner with people, and they might say to me casually, I've heard these stories directly from guys like Alan West. He was at a dinner one time with some people, just some constituents or something. Hey, Alan, what's your favorite kind of scotch? Oh, I don't know, like 15-year-old Glenfiddich, I guess. And the next day, there are 2 cases of Glenfiddich at Alan West's front door, waiting for him in the morning, the next day. And he would go in there as a representative, and he would sit there, and people would tell him, well, that's great, sir, but that's not how we do things here. In the freshman orientation, I want to do this and I want to do this. Well, but sir, that's not how we do things here. And my response would have been, I was sent here by the 12th Congressional District of California. Who sent you here? You don't get to tell me what happens here. I'm here to tell you what happens here. First thing that happens in the New Washington is you're fired. That's the first thing. The second thing that happens is we start counting on getting the job done and going home. Politicians are the problem, and that's why politicians have always, throughout history, back to the Romans, back to the Sumerians, back to the Babylonians, politicians have been universally despised because there is a certain kind of people that thinks that's the way to live, is by telling other people what to do. And I'm not built that way. If somebody said to me, you've just been elected senator from the state of California, my response would be, I can't leave for 6 years. I can't leave my business for 6 years and my home and family, go live in that swamp. I can't possibly live for, no way, absolutely not. So the answer is, if they want the job, they should be disqualified. And frankly, I think we would do much better, if we just randomly picked 535 people, 435 representatives, and 100 senators. If we just randomly picked them from the rolls of the taxpaying public, we'd be much better off. And I would much rather have a Congress, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I would much rather have a Congress that was 535 Democrats, 0 Republicans, if each one of them had just come from the real world with an actual business, who came to Washington, did what they needed to do, and went the hell back home again, the way it's supposed to be. I would love that. I would get down on my knees and worship it. Our problems would be over. Because by the time you get to Washington, what happens? Let's just say you're a representative. I get elected. Yoo-hoo! I got all these big plans. Well, they don't really do things like that here. So I spend my first year doing nothing. I spend my second year trying to get elected for my third year. And the fourth year I do nothing. The fifth year I try to get elected for the 6th year. And that's all that happens. And every single minute that I'm in Washington, I'm farther away from the people and the problems that I was sent there to solve. Are the neighborhoods, sidewalks in my community getting better or worse? How do I know? I'm jetting around to Cayman Islands or whatever. I personally think People talk about term limits. This is my personal belief. My personal belief is I do believe in term limits, and my term limit is 1 term. That's all. No re-election, no. You can be re-elected to a different office. If you are a representative and they really, really, really love you, then maybe they'll send you to the Senate. But that's it. And if you want to be governor, great. But no re-election to the same office. I don't have to spend my entire time trying to raise money from people who are trying to buy my vote. I don't have to be tempted by any of this. I want to go home. I don't want to stay here. It should be a lottery. It should be like jury duty. But thanks very much for saying so. I really do appreciate it. I just think that we could, I'll give you the actual straight answer. I am deeply worried about what would happen to me if I became president of the United States. I am really concerned about what it would do to my character to have that kind of power. And I think if I was president, if I was elected president, the first thing I would do is I would say, this is an executive order that voids all previous executive orders. That's executive order number 1. And executive order number 2 is there shall be no more executive orders. And I try to get those signed the first day, before it started to occur to me that my word is law, and anything that I simply imagine or speak out actually happens. Who's immune to this? Who? 2 people in history, maybe 3, Cincinnatus, George Washington, 3 out of the hundreds of millions of politicians. Who can resist that kind of power? Not me, certainly. I'd be at the feed trough, and I would be getting all the goodies I possibly could. So that's the way I feel about it. Is that it? You all did? Thank you very much. I was virtually elected.